I was 98 in June. So I was born and raised in Path Valley. So I've been through the Great Depression, Prohibition, the building of the Pennsylvania Turnpike, World War II, putting a man on the moon, and Obamacare.
Okay.
I've been mayor of Chambersburg, president of the Borough Council of Chambersburg. I've been county commissioner for 8 years, chairman of the board.
But I did have a question for you. When we talked during Natalie's entrepreneur class, I think you told me about the story about your very first car you bought from Frank. Can you share that with us?
Excuse me, I had bought a 1962 Olds at M&H in Chambersburg. Excuse me, this is before I knew Frank. And one Sunday night we were coming back from over in the valley, and at the Salem Road,
Around 11 there.
it was extremely cold and a lot of snow on the road and high snow. But for some reason or other, the four of us were all sitting in the front seat because it was so cold.
To stay warm. Oh, that was you and your wife and the two children.
Two children.
Okay.
And some guy was coming north, and he got right beside me, turned right into me, and he started ribbing about the center post of the between the front door and the back door. Threw me over across the street and right up to the gasoline pumps, and there I was up on a pile of snow. So
Oh my.
the guy was drunk.
Oh, that's sad.
We didn't get hurt, but that's the end of that story. So I went back to M&H, and I said my car had been damaged. I only had maybe 9,000 miles on it, and they took a look at it, and I said, I'm done. I don't want the car anymore. I want another. And I looked at one, and they said, well, how about the insurance on this car? I said, well, I'll get an appraisal. And shall we say it was maybe something minor in those days, $1,100. And they wanted the insurance money, and they wanted so much money for a 1963 Olds, and it was two-tone. What was the name of that one? Was that
Like a Dynamic 88.
Dynamic 88?
A Dynamic 88. That would be like an Olds 88, sort of.
Yeah.
About that size. Pretty good
So,
size car.
Full size, yes.
Full size car.
So, I got the fence line. I thought, you guys are really sticking it to me. I'm not. So I came down to see Mr. Hollar. I came in, had another car just like it here, and I said, I kind of like that car. He said, well, it's been here a little while. He said, what are you driving now? I said, well, I was able to drive the car.
Oh, okay. And you had it with you?
Yeah, he took a look at it, and I told him I'd been back to M&H. He would have done anything to get me away from M&H. He said, we'll trade your car on this car for so many dollars. You keep the insurance money yet.
Wow, that was generous. $1,000 worth of insurance money.
That was generous of him, and I never forgot that.
Well, I used to bring Dad's cars in for service. You know, he used to get a new car every couple of years, and so I was like a 16-year-old, and Dad would be working, and so in the summer I'd come in and bring his car in for service.
Oh,
And
makes sense.
one time I came in, and the guys were busy, and they didn't have time to work on it or something, so next thing I knew, Frank says, come over here, and he gives one of the mechanics, give him some tools, and he had me do the work. So, yeah.
So, did he pay you?
No.
He took good care of himself.
But Frank was kind of instrumental in inspiring me to work for General Motors. Well, Dad then encouraged me to try and get a job with GM, but you know, I went through 4 years of college, and but at the time when I graduated in '73 was the Arab oil embargo was 73, and GM was laying off people and not hiring.
Okay.
So it wasn't till a few years later till I finally got in with GM. So when it came time that I decided to try and apply with General Motors again, I wanted to work with Oldsmobile because we drove Oldsmobiles back in those years, but Oldsmobile wasn't hiring. But they said, well, why don't you try Chevrolet? It's larger, and you might have a better opportunity getting in with them. So I applied with Olds in Harrisburg, and Frank gave me some service manuals. He says, now read up here, your technical expertise a little bit. And so I read some shop manuals and applied. And like Dad says, I think Frank put in some good words for me.
That's a fun story.
When I would come down to see Frank, and I was about due to trade, Mr. Frank would kind of ignore me, and he'd pass me by, and he'd go to, and he'd say, "Hello, Mrs. Worley."
Oh, this is when she was with you. You guys were there together. Okay.
And he'd say, "Hello, Mrs. Worley. He said, I have a nice a Cadillac out here, and it would be nice if you could have it for the weekend to drive it and see how it runs." Then he would come back to me. That was his sales pitch, to get June interested in the car. And he was one of the greatest salesmen I think I ever learned to know. Now Frank was so good to me. Like sometimes I kind of considered him Uncle Frank, because he treated me like one of the family.
Yeah.
I ran for office, and Frank would get a
Petition?
a Corvette, bright red Corvette convertible, and he would have it washed, cleaned up. I would come down, pick it up, and I'd go over to Pathaughty in the Pathaughty picnic.
Okay.
And he would wait here until I came back, brought it back that same night. But his theory behind the whole thing was, I was running for commissioner, and I was well known in the valley. How best could he advertise his Corvette car from H&H Chevrolet in Shippensburg? And I would drive it in the parade, and he'd always thank me. I would say, well, what do we owe you? He said, that's good advertising for me, Sam.
Yeah.
That was another thing that Frank was most unusual about. He liked to talk to me a little bit about investments, just a little bit. As much as he wanted to tell me about the investment world as far individually and personally as far as he was concerned. But I can remember coming down here more than once, not having an appointment, walking in, and there would be people around, more than one person waiting to see him, and he would finally walk over to me and he'd say, "Hello, Mr. Worley, where are you parked?" I'd say, "Well, I'm parked out back or someplace like that." He said, "I'll meet you back at your car." And he would just completely leave everybody, come out and get in the car with me, and he'd have me drive him down to the trailer court, or he'd have me drive me back to the Glen Street area, and he would tell me what he owned and what he didn't own, and it was a way of his release from the pressure of the floor here, and I would drive him around, and he would tell me these stories, and he would just sit in there relaxed and tell me, and he would talk the whole time, and I would listen. That was one of his greatest stories that I remember, that he would take me out in the field.
What I always remembered about him was his memory, how great it was. There was one time I needed a part for one of my older cars, and he used to have the sort of what I call the junkyard back here.
Right.
And I said, "There's a car down there, and I'm interested in getting a used part off of it." He says, "That one doesn't have that part, it's already gone." So he knew what parts were on which cars.
That's the same part everybody else was looking for.
Yeah.
He was known for his demeanor. Like he had white shirt, black tie, like black suit, basically black shoes,
Black overcoat, a hat,
overcoat and hat.
always new shoes on, overshoes over his shoes.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, the other thing about his memory that I thought was terrific, I was here one time and walking around the shop with him, and he was paying some of the mechanics, and he paid them in cash, and he knew exactly how much each one got. Like, well, okay, you get so much and so many cents, and he knew exactly the dollar figure, and he didn't even have, it was all in his memory.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and so after he passed, for the first 4 months, when I was paying the guys, I did that too. But I didn't do it from memory. I had to write it down, and I put them on a little envelope.
Sure.
And I slipped money in a little envelope, and then whatever that dollar amount was, $100 or $200 or whatever, and then I'd write the person's name on it, and then I'd go by and say, "Here, Sam, your bill," because I couldn't do that with the whole cash thing. And he was also known for that, paying in cash.
Well, when we would have a car deal, finally we would get to a point where he knew that I wanted a car. Then he turned me over to upstairs.
Harold.
Harold.
Yeah, Harold was good with that typewriter.
Harold,
Remember the old World typewriter?
Yep, he was pick and punch.
Harold was a good guy. Well,
was.
Harold started working here in 1948. Did you ever hear the story about how he got to work in here?
No.
I don't think.
Well, there was a friend of Frank's and said, "I know a good boy. I'm going to send him down to see you." Like a high school kid, 17-year-old kid. But he didn't, I don't think he told him his name. And so coincidentally, like it was the next day, Harold showed up to ask Frank for a job. And Frank said, "You're hired." Only to find out a couple of days later that it was the wrong boy. The other kid hadn't showed up yet. And so Frank, just on this guy's recommendation, hired this young man, Harold Kaufman, but then it turned out that Harold was not the guy who was supposed to be coming in.
But I figure if you figure an hour for every 60 miles on the car, I spent about 6 months of my life in that car.
Oh my word.
What made you keep coming back to H&H?
Actually, it was 2 or 3-fold. It was the relationship I had with Mr. Hollar, which was a personal relationship, friendship, and I would say he really treated me like family. And secondly, the great service I got here at the agency.
How many other family members of yours have bought cars at H&H?
How many other family members of yours have bought
Other
cars
family members.
at H&H?
My son, my sister and her husband, my nephew,
Your niece.
matter of fact, 2 nephews were buying cars here.
Some of them bought some of my company cars.
Yeah. My personal friend, Marotte from Chambersburg, bought all of his olds here.
Oh, Morris Moreau.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Morris
I know
Moreau.
Morris. How about Evelyn Angle?
Yes, my niece,
That's
my
what I was
cousin.
saying.
She's your
niece.
cousin.
My cousin.
Okay.
Not only buys cars here, and I would come in with her when she buys the cars, but she and her husband got a couple of the
Monte Carlo company cars.
company
I had.
cars that Bill turned in.
Okay, yeah.
What makes H&H different from the other companies?
I think the personal attention that I got when I came into the agency, it was outstanding. Never too busy to see me.
Oh, that's good. And then, so the first impression led the way for the rest of everything.
I think the first impression, the first time I met Mr. Hollar, kind of led the way, and it continued on until he passed away in '88. He was a salesman of none other kind. He really was. He was a salesman.
Well, I just want to say real quick, thank you guys for letting us film this so that we can share your story and a bit of the H&H history with everyone else.